PhD research, which I finished a few years ago now in 2013. And particularly I'm going to be talking about an anti-dam protest, a campaign that was in Chile and Patagonia, and the use of images that were involved in the campaign, the stories that were being told through the images about the place and the people. The kinds of questions I was asking myself at the time were, whose voices dominate in these stories and at whose expense? And how does that influence the flow of resources in and out of the region? Who do they go to and who misses out? My background is cultural anthropology, and this PhD was in cultural anthropology, and it's what led me to my interest in design anthropology. So I'm thinking about the anti-dam campaign as sort of a strategic design project, if you like. And in part, my thesis critiqued the design of the campaign. So I started my PhD in 2008 from Brisbane, and I had spent the last few years before that working in the Pilbara region of Western Australia and looking at native title research with Aboriginal communities there. And I became really interested in the way identity and sense of place was asserted when there was an environmental conflict of some kind. So conflict over how land or water should be managed or used. And so I knew I wanted to do my PhD in Chile. And I was looking on the internet and I found these images and some videos on YouTube of this protest that had been held a couple of months before, where people living in remote areas in the south of Chile, in Patagonia, had ridden for 9 days on horseback to express their view that a proposal to build 5 hydroelectric dams shouldn't go ahead. They arrived in the major town, Coyhaique, on horseback to deliver a letter to the government to express their discontent with the project. And I thought this is a great expression of identity and sense of belonging to a place. So I decided to make my thesis about this project. So this is where I spent 3 years. Caleta Tortel is a tiny town in the south of Chile. It's there are no roads there. People hand-make their own boats out of cypress. It's about 300 people that live there, and a lot of the people who are involved in that protest that I just showed the image of come from this area, sort of around here. And the route they rode started in Cochrane. They came all the way up on horseback to Coyhaique. So this was a region that I lived in for most of that time. It's the second largest reserve of fresh water in the world, so it's very attractive to energy companies for building hydroelectric dams. And the Chilean state have identified an energy crisis. So they've got some big mines operating in the north, and hydroelectricity in this area, well, I should say, this is post-dictatorship Chile. So the water rights to the rivers in Patagonia were given away to European and North American energy companies. So the water rights aren't actually owned by Chileans. And so the proposal to build the dams was put forward by a conglomerate owned by Spanish and Chilean energy companies, and the transmission line was supposed to be the largest in the world, and that was to run all the way to Santiago, and built by a Canadian company. So what I did, I arrived in Coyhaique. I did some interviews with environmentalists. I contacted NGOs, local, national and international, and started talking to people about what environmentalism means, what Patagonia means, what conservation means, and just to get an idea of how people were using these terms. I also did a lot of work shadowing, so I followed around subsistence loggers, park rangers, all kinds of people. I did participant observation, and I collected a lot of photographs from people as well. I was interested in, I noticed these images being used for social and political recognition, and so I was interested in how people represented themselves in this place. When I arrived, I was really surprised to see that the dominant images in Anti-Dam Campaign actually looks like this. So it showed iconic, fragile, big, pristine nature without any people in it. And I thought, where are these people that I saw? You know, that the thing that attracted me to this place, and there was this disconnect between what I saw and what I was experiencing. Next. So there are some very influential environmentalists in this area. Yvonne Chenard, who owns Patagonia Clothing, his former CEO, Christine Tompkins, who is married to Douglas Tompkins, who founded North Face. They have bought huge areas of land, and they're transitioning it from ranches and pastoralism to national park. And so there's this transition in the way land is being used. They've also funded the Anti-Dam Campaign, and they're very influential in the way that images of Patagonia are being released to the world. This was one of those projects, so they hired a bunch of conservation photographers, and again, the images that were produced were these expanses of the river to be dammed, and no people in it. So,
how much? Sorry to interrupt. How much land have they bought? Do you have any idea?
I couldn't tell you the figures, but the area of one of the foundations that Douglas Tompkins founded, that is slightly to the north of this area, and actually cuts Chile in two. So it runs from the Andes in the east to the ocean. There's no road to connect this region with the rest of Chile, so that's a debate as well, because to get there you have to go through Argentina or take a boat. So yeah, they're big areas of land. Bridget Bassor, who took this photograph, I shadowed her, and she's in a very difficult position because she's a conservation photographer wanting to tell stories about people affected by transition, sort of environmental change, and she's working in an industry where typically people aren't in the story. So yeah, quite a problem for her. But this was one of the images she produced, and I think part of getting her images out there involves telling particular versions of the story. So here, these are a couple of people from Tortel who they're depicted. This was published in National Geographic, by the way, and they're shown collecting driftwood from the Baker River, and it says in the write-up that they use this sustainable method of heating their house and cooking and etc. The issue is though that people in Tortel don't actually have power, so it conveys a message that they're close to nature because they're using sustainable wood, but they actually don't have any other option. So yeah, there's a whole range of issues there about how people access energy and economic development that gets overlooked. Similar here as well, this was called The Last Gaucho, and it depicts kind of a culture that's at its end and sort of a fragility in this culture that could be lost if the dams were to go ahead. but it actually was taken on the former ranch that is now a conservation park, or being turned into a conservation park. The sheep that are in the image are being sold off because they're considered detrimental to the environment. And so the story that's being told doesn't match reality. So it's actually conservation that is threatening the gaucho lifestyle rather than the dams. If that makes sense. Yeah, thanks. So towards the end of my time there, the dams were approved, and so this was in Coyhaique. Everyone was standing outside the government building, and we heard that it got approved 11-1, and everything went crazy. And for a few weeks there was tear gas in the street every day, rocks being thrown, flags being burnt, and just complete chaos. So around this time, there was a really great documentary made by a Chilean researcher, and I watched it probably around these weeks, and it terrified me because she had done research on a very similar topic in a different area of Chile and been accused of and charged with terrorism, locked in jail for 3 months, had her her field notes and film footage confiscated, and said that this was such a harrowing ordeal because she was terrified of losing the confidentiality of the participants that had agreed to participate in her work. And so this became very prominent in my mind, and I started thinking about how can I guarantee confidentiality to the people who agree to share their stories with me, and also make sure that their stories get heard. Yep. And so what I was constantly asking myself, what is my place in this research? I became less and less involved in the anti-dam campaign myself because I suppose my research was uncovering things that weren't useful to the campaign and may have potentially jeopardised it in the eyes of environmentalists. And so how do I tell the story of people who have participated in my research when the environmental agenda is so powerful and running its own course? It doesn't need me, essentially. I was concerned about how storytelling and representations through these images was changing the identity of the place and the way that people related to their place in nature. And given the political context, how to ensure the confidentiality of participants. So that's it. Thank you.